They said you weren't enough. They whispered doubts in your ears until you began to believe them. The world tried to bury you beneath shame, rejection, and fear. But what they didn't realize, what they never saw coming, was that while they were doubting you, mocking your worth, and shutting doors in your face, God was working in silence, building something no eye had seen, no ear had heard, and no heart had ever imagined. This is the story of someone like you, someone forgotten, underestimated, and pushed aside, who became the proof that when God decides to elevate you, no one can stop it, not even your own doubts. The sun had barely risen when Zara opened her eyes. The chill in the morning air bit her skin, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the same ache she felt every day, an ache lodged deep in her chest, where dreams used to live. She had grown up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and where everyone had an opinion. Zara was the girl who didn't quite fit in. She wasn't loud enough, not bold enough, not charming in the ways they expected. Her dreams of becoming a powerful speaker, of sharing her story with the world, were laughed at by those closest to her. Who would listen to you? Her uncle had once scoffed. You're just a nobody with nothing but big fantasies. Even her own mother, worn down by the weight of bills and life's bitterness, had told her to focus on realistic things. Life isn't fairy tales, Zara. You're not going to be on some stage preaching about hope. That's not for people like us. But Zara knew deep down something others couldn't feel. A voice that spoke in the stillness. A warmth that crept in during her loneliest nights. It would whisper, "You were made for more. Hold on. Trust me." Still, the doubts came, not just from others, but from within. For every job she didn't get, every audition she failed, every time her motivational videos barely got 10 views, the voice of doubt grew louder. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just delusional. Maybe God forgot about me. And yet, the whisper returned, quiet but firm. I am not done. Watch what I do with what they called useless. One rainy afternoon, as Zara sat at her desk, contemplating deleting her entire channel, she received a message. It was from a girl named Liana. Just a few lines, barely more than a breath. Your words saved me. I was about to end everything, but your story made me believe again. Thank you. Please, never stop. Zara stared at the message for a long time. Her fingers trembled as she held her phone. One person. Just one. But in that moment, it was as if heaven had parted and spoken directly to her. God was saying, "See? Even if the whole world doubts you, if I choose you, I will use you." That night, she didn't sleep. She wrote. She cried. She prayed. And then she pressed record. Her next video wasn't polished. She didn't hide the cracks in her voice or the tears on her cheeks. She told her truth, the pain, the loneliness, the voice that had kept her going. She ended with words she hadn't planned, words that flowed from a place deeper than her mind. If you feel like the world has counted you out, listen to me. God hasn't. They may doubt you, but God is about to elevate you in front of them all, not because of your power, but because of his promise. She posted it and went to bed, not expecting much. But when she woke up, something had shifted. Tens of thousands of views. Comments from all over the world. People saying they felt something they hadn't felt in years. Hope, fire, purpose. And Zara understood this was not just about her. This was about what happens when one person keeps showing up, even when everyone else stops believing. When one soul listens to God's whisper louder than the crowd's laughter. Weeks passed. Every message, every email, every person who reached out became another layer of strength around Zara's spirit. Her platform grew, not because she was chasing fame, but because she was finally standing in her calling. And just when she thought the miracles were done, an invitation arrived. An international faith conference wanted her to be the keynote speaker. Your story is impacting lives. The letter read, "We believe your voice needs to be heard on a global stage." Zara sat in silence, clutching the envelope, remembering every person who said she'd never make it, every family dinner where they smirked at her little YouTube dreams. Every night she cried, wondering if she was just chasing shadows. But now, God was elevating her right in front of every doubt. not just in front of the world, but in front of her past. When she stood on the stage of that grand auditorium, lights blazing and thousands watching, Zara didn't just speak. She wept worship and declared victory, not for herself, but for everyone who'd been made to feel small. And in the audience, someone was watching from the shadows. Her mother. She had flown in quietly, sitting unnoticed at the back. Her eyes welled up as she saw the daughter she once doubted now being cheered by strangers, loved by nations. And for the first time in a long time, she prayed, God, thank you for proving me wrong. Zara's story had only just begun, but already she was walking the promise spoken over her in silence. God wasn't just lifting her up, he was doing it in front of the very people who said it would never happen. Because when God says he's going to elevate you, he doesn't do it in the corner. He does it boldly, loudly, publicly, in front of every doubt, every hater, every wound, every whisper. This is only the first chapter. The real storm is still coming. But so is a breakthrough that will silence every last echo of unbelief. They never thought she'd rise this far. Not the ones who mocked her videos. Not the relatives who said she should get a real job. And certainly not the so-called friends who vanished when her life was at its lowest. But now, as Zara's name echoed in places she never imagined, God wasn't just lifting her up. He was unveiling his glory through her. But elevation brings exposure, and exposure tests your foundation. What comes next will not only shake her world. It will define who she becomes when the lights dim, and the whispers return louder than ever. The roar of the audience still rang in her ears, even after she had stepped off stage. People rushed up to her, crying, hugging, thanking her for her words. Some said they had flown across the country just to hear her in person. But while the outside world celebrated, Zara felt something shift deep within her. A strange silence. Not the peace that came from God. No, this was different. This was a silence that often follows a mountaintop. She sat in a hotel room that night alone, her speech notes scattered, her phone buzzing with endless notifications. But her eyes were locked on the skyline, beyond the glass. 1,000 lights blinking like stars, but none of them comforting. God, what now? She whispered. And just like that, the battle returned, not with swords or fire, but with subtle thoughts. They love you now, but for how long? You're not that special. This won't last. Remember how many times you failed before? Zara clenched her fists. These voices sounded eerily familiar. Doubt had returned, not through people this time, but through memory. The past has a funny way of knocking on your door, even when your hands are full of blessings. That week, as her channel hit 1 million subscribers, and she received requests for interviews, partnerships, and book deals, the pressure began to mount. Every decision felt heavier. Every choice felt watched. She felt exposed, and with exposure came critics, new ones. Anonymous comments appeared under her videos. She's faking it. This is all for clout. Another influencer pretending to care. Zara tried to ignore them. But one night, a direct message appeared that felt like poison. You think you're elevated? Please. You're just a girl with a sad story and a good camera. God didn't choose you. You just got lucky. She stared at it for a long time, longer than she should have. Her heart pounded, her chest tightened. She felt like that same girl again, the one sitting in a dim bedroom with shattered dreams. And that night, she cried, not because she believed them, but because a small part of her still feared they were right. Why do I still feel this weak, God? She asked into the silence. You lifted me up, but why does it still hurt? She expected quiet, but what she heard next wasn't a whisper. It was a roar within her soul. I didn't elevate you because you were strong. I elevated you to show that my strength shines best in weakness. And just like that, the tears stopped. Her breath steadied. She realized something crucial. Elevation isn't a reward. It's a responsibility. And now that the light was on her, she had a choice, to shrink or to let it shine brighter. Then the call came. It was from a man named Elijah, head of an international nonprofit. He had seen her videos and felt compelled to reach out. We're organizing a faith and restoration program in Nairobi, he said. Young women rescued from trafficking, broken spirits, shattered identities. We've tried everything to help them believe again. But after watching you speak, I knew you were the voice they needed. Zara was stunned. Travel across the world? Share her heart in a place she'd never been? Stand in front of people whose pain she could barely imagine? She felt unworthy. I don't know if I'm the right one, she said, heart pounding. But Elijah was calm. You are, because only someone who knows brokenness can lead others to healing. After praying hard, Zara said yes. Kenya was nothing like she'd ever seen. The colors, the culture, the chaos. It was alive in every breath. But more powerful than the landscape were the eyes of the girls she met. Eyes hollowed by trauma. Eyes afraid to trust again. Eyes that once believed in dreams but now only recognized darkness. The first time she spoke to them, her voice cracked. Not out of fear, but reverence. These weren't just lost girls. They were survivors, warriors, and she knew what it meant to stand in front of doubt, especially the kind that lives within your own reflection. She told them her story, the failures, the betrayals, the nights she begged God for purpose. She told them how God didn't wait until she was perfect to use her. He came right into the mess and breathed destiny into her broken pieces. At first, they didn't react, just stared. But then one of them, a girl named Kayamika, raised her hand and whispered, "Do you really believe God can still use someone like me?" Zara walked over, held her hand, looked her straight in the eyes. Not only can he use you, he's already writing your elevation story. One no devil, no doubt, no trauma can erase. That day, something powerful happened, not in the form of miracles or thunder, but in the quiet sobs of girls who began to believe again. A spark had been lit, not by performance, but by truth. Back home, Zara returned changed. But the enemy doesn't rest when purpose awakens. New doubts slithered in like smoke through cracked windows. This time, they weren't about her calling, but her past. A scandal erupted on social media. An old acquaintance accused her of faking her early struggles, claimed she was never that broken. They posted half-truths, distorted messages, screenshots taken out of context. Suddenly, the same audience that once praised her turned cold. She lied. She manipulated us. She's a fraud. Zara watched in disbelief as the comments turned brutal. Sponsors backed away. Interviews were canceled. Her inbox, once full of gratitude, was now drowning in hate. This wasn't just a trial. It was a firestorm. And for the first time since she had risen, she felt herself falling. She locked herself in her room. No camera, no makeup, no words, just silence. But God doesn't abandon us in our silence. He speaks through it. And as Zara sat in the dark, questioning everything, she heard him again, not loud, not distant, but closer than ever. You are not who they say you are. You are who I called you to be. I didn't elevate you for their approval. I elevated you for my glory. And my glory does not depend on their applause. That voice, the same one that had comforted her as a forgotten girl, was now standing with her again in the fire. And with that, she rose. She turned on the camera, not to defend herself, not to argue, but to declare, if you're looking for someone perfect, it's not me. I've failed. I've struggled. I've doubted. But every time I was ready to quit, God stepped in. Not because I was strong, but because He is. And whether you believe me or not, I'll keep speaking. Because I know the one who lifted me. And He is not done. The video went viral, not for its flash, but for its truth. People saw something deeper than image. They saw authentic faith. And in that moment, the second wave of her elevation began, not in front of fans, but in front of fire. Because the real power of God's elevation isn't in the celebration. It's in the storm. When you're surrounded by lies but still choose truth. When you're betrayed but still choose mercy. When you're doubted but still believe. Zara had learned. God doesn't just elevate to show the world your strength. He elevates you to show the world His. And the final part of her journey, that's where everything will be revealed. The betrayal, the breakthrough, the blessing beyond the battle. When God says, I'm elevating you, He doesn't just mean you'll rise. He means you'll be seen by friends, enemies, skeptics, and even the ghosts of your past. But what happens when elevation feels like exposure? When the spotlight reveals scars you thought were hidden? For Zara, the journey didn't end at the mountaintop. It plunged into the deepest valleys of betrayal, misunderstanding, and inner conflict. Yet, what she didn't realize was this final battle wasn't meant to break her. It was meant to crown her. Zara's message had gone viral, but not for the reason she expected. Her raw confession, standing tall in vulnerability, shook the internet. It didn't trend because of fame. It resonated because of truth. People weren't just watching a speaker anymore. They were witnessing a resurrection in real time. Suddenly, the tide shifted. Messages flooded in. Your words helped me stand up again. Now I understand what real strength looks like. Thank you for not hiding the struggle behind the success. But while the world leaned in with admiration, Zara was still facing the real war within, because the accusation hadn't disappeared. The person who tried to tarnish her name wasn't backing down. More receipts were posted. Private voice notes manipulated into something sinister. Old friends, one she hadn't heard from in years, jumped in to say, I always had a weird feeling about her. And in the courtroom of public opinion, perception was louder than fact. She could feel her spirit thinning, like a candle flickering in heavy wind. Even the strongest faith can bend under relentless judgment. Until one night, she couldn't take it anymore. Zara knelt beside her bed, tears soaking into the carpet. God, why? You said you were elevating me, but this feels like destruction. Silence. Then, in that sacred stillness, a divine whisper rose in her spirit. Elevation doesn't come without pruning. I'm not breaking you. I'm revealing what cannot follow you into your destiny. And with those words, something clicked. She'd been trying to hold on to everything. Reputation, validation, innocence. But God was saying, let it fall. Let every mask drop. Let every false alliance shatter. Let the spotlight burn away what isn't eternal. This wasn't punishment. It was purification. A few days later, the truth surfaced. The accuser had edited the voice notes. A former friend of the attacker came forward, exposing the entire plot. Jealousy, bitterness, and an attempt to hijack Zara's influence for personal gain. The very platform used to destroy her had now turned to vindicate her. News spread fast. Apologies poured in. But Zara wasn't interested in revenge. She didn't post victory tweets. She didn't retaliate. Instead, she posted one simple message. God elevated me in front of every doubt, not for me to gloat, but for others to believe. And that message, it shattered every wall. The next morning, her phone rang. It was Elijah again. I need you back, he said. This time, not just to speak, but to lead. We're launching a global faith initiative. We've been praying for someone anointed not just by words, but by wounds. Zara froze. Me? Led a global movement? Her heart trembled, not out of fear, but awe, because the girl who once begged God in a closet now stood at the threshold of something far greater than herself. She agreed. The next few months were a blur of transformation. From the U.S. to Africa, from London to Philippines, Zara began traveling, building teams, mentoring broken souls, creating spaces where pain wasn't silenced but redeemed. She stood on stages, yes, but more importantly, she sat in living rooms, homeless shelters, hospitals, places where real healing happens. And everywhere she went, she carried the same message. Doubt may speak, but God decides. One evening, while in Brazil, a young woman approached her after a gathering. Her name was Anna. She was barely 19, eyes hollow, arms scarred, voice trembling. I was about to end everything, she said. But then your story found me. I watched you fight for your life, and it helped me fight for mine. Zara embraced her, tears flowing freely. And in that moment, she realized this is what elevation is for. Not applause, but salvation. But even in this new chapter, God wasn't done. Because now, he wasn't just elevating her publicly. He was healing her privately. One morning, during quiet prayer, a vision came to her. She was standing barefoot in a wide field, a crown in her hands. But instead of placing it on her own head, she turned and placed it on someone else's. Then God spoke. True elevation is when you lift others higher than yourself. That morning, she began building something she had only dreamed of, a global mentorship network for women who have been silenced, shamed, or overlooked. Not just conferences, but healing retreats, skill-building programs, spiritual counseling, kingdom restoration. She called it Elevate Her. And this time, she wasn't the face. She raised others, empowered others, funded businesses for single mothers, provided scholarships for girls denied education, gave abandoned women a voice again. And all of it, every soul touched, was rooted in her story, the suffering, the shame, the surrender. Then came the final moment, a prestigious award nomination, one of the highest honors in the field of humanitarian faith leadership, a televised ceremony, cameras, spotlights, millions watching. Zara stood backstage, heart steady. As they called her name, the applause was thunderous. But as she walked forward, she wasn't thinking about the crowd. She was thinking about that little girl who once cried in secret, about every voice that called her unworthy, every door slammed in her face, every night she spent feeling forgotten. And most of all, she thought about God, not the distant idea, but the Father who never left, the one who didn't need perfection to elevate her, only surrender. She accepted the award. But her speech, it wasn't about her. She looked into the camera and said, "This is not my trophy. It belongs to every person who ever felt like they were too broken, too messy, too doubted to rise. God is not looking for the perfect. He's looking for the willing. And when He elevates you, He'll do it in front of every lie, every betrayal, every doubt, just to show the world that He alone writes the final word." Silence, then a standing ovation, not for a celebrity, but for a servant. Zara's story isn't just one of success. It's a story of divine reversal, of ashes turned to beauty, of whispers turned to war cries, of doubt turned to destiny. And now, the elevation is complete, not because the world clapped, but because her life became a mirror reflecting God. So, if you're reading this feeling unseen, unloved, underestimated, God is saying to you, I'm not just lifting you, I'm revealing you, not to shame you, but to glorify me through you. Every doubt that tried to destroy you will soon witness your rise, and they will know it was me all along. Stay faithful. Keep moving. Your elevation is closer than you think. And this time, it will be in front of every doubt.